Is Trump mentally unfit to be president? Last October, a group of 27 mental health experts published this book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump. In it, they warned that Trump's behavior shows him to be dangerously unstable, describing him as a pathological narcissist who's delusional, suffers from paranoid ideation, lacks conscience and empathy, and exhibits a host of destructive and dangerous psychiatric symptoms. That editor's name?
It's Dr. Bandy Lee.
Dr. Bandy Lee is an internationally recognized expert on violence. She organized the Duty to Warn conference and edited the book, The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump.
Since the book came out, Dr. Lee has become kind of the face of mental health experts warning about Trump.
We express our consensus view that Mr. Trump is a danger to national and international security. Some of the psychological signs are impulsivity, recklessness, paranoid reactions, having a loose grip on reality, lacking empathy, having rage reactions. All of these are highly associated with violence. As an expert on violence, I can tell you that previous violence shows an indication for possible future violence, and he has already shown verbal aggressiveness, history of sexual assault, incitement to violence at his rallies, endorsement of violence in public speeches, and he's shown an attraction to violence and powerful weapons, as well as he has taunted hostile nations with nuclear power. All these things are signs of danger. It's really an unprecedented event that such a large number of mental health professionals have come forth about their concerns about any president.
What are some of the key concerns about Trump that you and your colleagues raise?
Well, I wrote a letter together with Judith Herman to the New York Times in which we raised two issues. One was his relation to reality, which is, I would say, solipsistic and untenable and very dangerous to everyone.
What do you mean solipsistic?
Solipsistic from within the self. In other words, he only sees the world from within his sense of self. He can't have empathy for others. He can't really think into the future, the consequences of his actions, because he's totally preoccupied with the immediate event and how he can deal with it or manipulate it as emerging through the perception on the part of his sense of self. That's very extreme. People who are psychotic behave that way.
We also can understand psychopathology, this idea of a feeling that one has the right to do whatever they desire to do. We also see the idea of, talk about obsession and compulsive behavior being played out.
There are people who lie all the time and don't know it. Confabulation is when someone tells you something that's absolutely wrong and they firmly believe it to be true. This happens a lot with people with neurologic disease. When you see someone who lies all the time, you say, what could be wrong with that person? Is this a personality problem? Or is this a brain problem? Is it getting worse?
I'm concerned about many things about his mental instability, but especially in the immediate present, I'm most worried about his unfettered authority to launch nuclear weapons.
We feel generally that there should be a more extensive kind of examination of American presidents or potential American presidents, and especially in relationship to their potential response to an extreme crisis, such as nuclear threat.
Trump has his finger on the triggers of 3,000 or 4,000 nuclear weapons. It's clear that if he even took one step in that direction, he could turn the world wars and the genocides of the 20th century into minor footnotes in the history of human violence. We can see a level of violent destructiveness on this earth that we've never seen before.
The book's editor met with 12 U.S. senators to talk about Trump's mental fitness.
A bill on Capitol Hill that could start a formal process to evaluate any president's mental fitness is getting more interest, with 56 co-sponsors, all Democrats. The Democrat who introduced the bill joins me now, Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thanks so much for being here. You and several of your Democratic House colleagues met with a psychiatry professor from Yale, Dr. Bandy Lee. She told CNN today, quote, "As the president is unraveling, he seems to be losing his grip on reality and reverting to conspiracy theories. There are signs that he is going into attack mode when he is under stress. That means he has the potential to become impulsive and very volatile, unquote. Did she say that to the assembled congresspeople?
Well, I think that Dr. Lee and other psychiatrists who've been up to meet with members of Congress have been predicting increasingly delusional and paranoid behavior on the part of the president. Of course, we're not mental health professionals, we're not psychiatrists, that's not our role, but we do have a very defined and important role under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution, which is to set up a body that could act with the vice president in the event of an emergency when the president becomes unable for mental or physical reasons to successfully discharge the powers and duties of office.
Sure,
so the bill just sets up the body that would be able to go to work if there were a real crisis.
Concerns have gotten so bad that Trump agreed to be screened.
Time and hasn't bothered to do the work. That's one reason.
Welcome to the conference, The More Dangerous State of the World and the Need for Fit Leadership. I'm Dr. Bandy Lee, President of the World Mental Health Coalition, the first and largest professional organization to address directly the problems of dangerous leadership. This is not a political conference. It is a medical one. It is about the state of mental health in our country and the survival of our human species. It is also about the dangers of a man who has created what I have come to call Trump contagion. We currently live in a very dangerous world, and the mix of psychological dangerousness and mental unfitness in a powerful office can only exponentially increase the dangers. Hence, leading national security experts and renowned mental health experts have exceptionally convened here today to speak about the safeguarding of American democracy and all humankind. Politics have not been able to solve these critical quandaries of our time. Discussions must occur across disciplines, especially ones grounded in expert knowledge that is neutral from political affiliations. That is what we are doing today. Seldom have such a group of distinguished experts of multiple fields convened together in the same place in order to discuss matters of central importance. We'll hear from Matthew Bywater, the only non-mental health expert on this panel. He is a student, but he also represents the next generation. He has a master's in international human rights from London School of Economics and Political Science. He has studied authoritarian societies such as China and North Korea, and is now ambitiously working to submit the World Mental Health Coalition's Declaration of the Freedom of Mind to the United Nations. Mr. Bywater.
On February 27, 2020, President's Day, the World Mental Health Coalition, led by Bandy Lee, held a meeting in New York City. They noted how the failure to conceive the Trump problem as one of mental health had resulted in the political failure to impeach, and how our understanding of oppression and warfare was failing to account for the psychological weaponry being employed. So they put forward a tool for citizens groups to correctly identify and target the problem. The first declaration of freedom of mind in history. The world will remember that day. The declaration opens up unprecedented ways to protect the mind, including by submitting the declaration to the United Nations. More than a tool, we now have a template and a blueprint that can act as the basis for an international agreement guaranteeing the most fundamental of all freedoms. The declaration responds to the authoritarian takeover and public health emergency that marked the Trump presidency and breaks new ground with its protections. It specifies and outlaws all the main variants of mind control. It defines and prohibits the phenomenon of mental slavery, as well as specifying a psychological right to individuate. And, with respect to today's theme of presidential fitness and the duty to warn, the declaration creates an unqualified prohibition of censoring speech, media, and experts in relation to mental health issues, together with an unqualified right of the public to fully access information and expertise. By definition, an unqualified prohibition or right permits no exemptions. Current human rights law, by contrast, permits restricting freedom of speech in times of emergency, despite it being emergencies which most strongly call for the public intervention of experts. The hallmark of authoritarianism is an imbalance and abuse of power within a human relationship, the blind submission to authority and the suppression of one's free will. Authoritarianism begins at home and endures in our schools, workplaces, and institutions. Before it becomes a political or social problem, it is first a psychological disorder afflicting individuals. This disorder afflicts both ruled and ruler, victim and victimizer, or predator and prey, to quote Trump himself. This is the dividing line, not traditional left or right, but authoritarian or democratic, anti or pro-social, pathologically disordered or not. Authoritarianism is part of the human condition, but it needn't always be. We have the tools to push back, with human rights at the centerpiece of this endeavor. Protecting freedom of mind is as much education as it is law. The public need to learn to defend this freedom against those who would violate it. By learning to form and articulate their own opinions and challenge those of others, people can overcome their submissive attitudes. Ira Shaleph's models of courageous fellowship and intelligent disobedience are the building block to this democratic revolution. In short, think, blink, choose, and sometimes just say no. Lest we underestimate the ramifications of this undertaking, this entails a fundamental reordering of how human societies function. It will dismantle the last vestiges of authoritarianism in our cultures and will help to build a peace that humankind has never seen. When one pushes the envelope, the world is never prepared. Proponents of freedom of mind face extensive and wide-ranging opposition. Freedom of mind is not simply irrelevant to the powerful, it is an impediment to their modus operandi. Much of the academic middle remain perplexed by the rise of elected authoritarians, or even right-away mind control as a cult problem that afflicts the fringes of society. Proposals to update the law to reflect advances in the science of social influence have met resistance from legal traditionalists. And in the domain of human rights, a rights violation is still narrowly conceived as involving situations where the violator is a governmental actor. We stand well and truly on the precipice. The spread of democracy has halted and even reversed as dangerous leaders take charge of entire countries. Destructive mind control techniques have spread from the cultic fringes of society into the mainstream. The cult leader's playbook has gone mainstream is not yet a truism, but it soon will be. But there is no despair without hope. An emerging body of mind protective law continues to develop and expand at the national level. We're living through a golden age of cult awareness. The word narcissist has well and truly entered the lexicon. Hundreds of thousands of families from Hong Kong, Turkey, and Russia have embarked upon a new life in the free world, determined to protect and nurture their young children's minds. During recent mass protests in China, protesters identified and skillfully pushed back against the mind control of the Chinese Communist Party. As this psychological awakening slowly extends across the world, it shows us that humanity is not too thin a community to base a universal right to be mentally free. It is the widest community we have. And that is why freedom of mind is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bywater. So could we take a question here?
Yes, I was wondering from anyone on the panel, and y'all were so great and elucidative, what is the role of I feel we're in an emergency right now. It's a 5-star alarm and not being treated as such, but the press in helping us and help saving us because, you know, they had a lot of power and pushing Biden now in the New York Times, the editorials and this and that, but I don't see that effort. And if you have any ideas how to appeal to the press, other than letters to the editor or people at your level, can somehow, because they will reach the voters. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Would anyone like to answer?
I would like to say that Bandy's been censored.
I know.
I have been censored. I used to be in the media all the time. Every cult story, I would be on every major thing. Nope. There are corporate media empires, and at some level, are they Opus Dei? Are they Putin influenced? I don't know, but there's censorship at a very high level. So all I can say is I've been doing a lot of podcasts and smaller events like this because we have to get the word out to the public.
And also that censorship has to be understood as a human rights violation. It's not currently.
And what do you do about that?
Well,
What do you do about that human rights violation?
You mean in the short term or the long term? Well, in the short term, it's not a legal offense or a violation. But in the long term, we submit the declaration to the United Nations, and then it becomes normalized and incorporated into national law. But that's a long-term policy. So.